Welcome to Dance Unscripted. I am your host, Amy Elizabeth, and on this episode, we are joined by Kesha McKey. Kesha is a dance educator, choreographer, and administrator based in New Orleans, Louisiana. We dive into her journey from a pre-med undergraduate degree to a career in dance that spans over 25 years. The effects of tropical storms and hurricanes on the learning and creative processes, as well as the creative process defining creative research, resilience, and so much more. This inspiring conversation illustrates the impact dance has on students, dancers, and audiences alike. I do hope it speaks to you as it did to me. Welcome to Dance Unscripted. I am your host, Amy Elizabeth, and I am honored to have with us on this episode Kesha McKey. Kesha was born and raised in New Orleans, has a Bachelor's of Science in Pre-Med and a Master's of Fine Arts in Dance Performance from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. She's been a dance educator in the New Orleans area for over 25 years, the founder and artistic director of KM Dance Project, and currently serves as the Director of Arts at the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts and Dancing Grounds teaching artist and Dance for Social Change choreographer. Kesha, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so I gotta ask, you are a well-established choreographer, performer, educator, and administrator.
Mm-hmm.
So how does one jump from pre-med to a lifetime career in dance?
Right. Guilty as charged. Okay, so, I've been dancing since I was 4 years old. Dance has always been a part of my life. It was my first choice as far as a career is concerned. Getting a pre-med degree was more of my parents saying, you want a degree in what? In dance. Okay. And let's think about something that's going to be a little bit more practical and a fallback plan. So that was me appeasing, my parents and getting, of course, I had some interest in some dentistry. I had a little bit of interest there. But yeah, it was mainly the push from parents and family to go in that direction for something that was a little bit more secure, especially during that time, because, when I was going to college, having a degree or getting a degree in dance was not very popular. So it was definitely something that my parents wanted to ensure that I was, setting myself up for success.
It is quite common, actually. There are most dancers or even artists. I too, when I started my undergraduate career, I was double majoring because of my parents' concerns for my security moving into adulthood. And they're not wrong. They're really not. It's coming from a place of love. We know that it is. But yeah, it's very common for dancers to have either a double major or start somewhere and end somewhere else. I also think that's part of us as dancers is that I would say dancers and artists, we're very complex. Our minds work and quite complex. We can go many different pathways. I mean, dancer, choreographer, administrator,
Right.
educator. I mean, the list goes on. We are fully complex and incredible humans. Actually, I might be a little biased, but yes, I do feel that way.
Absolutely.
Well, you did start. So we mentioned that you are currently the director of art at the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts, but you actually started there as a student in the dance program, came back as a faculty member, advanced to the department chair of dance, and now moving up to the director of the arts. So what has that relationship been like for you?
Yeah, NOCA has a really special place in my heart. Attending NOCA really gave me a lot of the, the not just the technique and the dance skills or whatever, but that grounding in hard work and work ethic and professionalism, all those skills that transcend any kind of art discipline, transcend whatever career, right? It just literally, it's what you need to be able to, to thrive in a successful career.
Yeah.
So it really had a special place in my heart. And so, I, of course, went to pre-med and then doing all these other things, dancing here, dancing there. And after Hurricane Katrina,
Mm.
things were really disrupted. It was a transformative time. And so the position opened because a lot of the faculty either had not returned, were not able to return, and even a lot of the students. So it was a really vulnerable place for the institution. And I'm really honored to be a part of that because, I kind of got in there and was a part of the rebuilding of that program.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really special for me to be able to come back and give, to a place that had given me so much. And to also think about, after the storm, it was so stressful, like so traumatic
Mm-hmm.
on, artists, on, teachers, and on students. And so to really provide a space that had consistency, a space that really supported their training and, really fed their passion for dance
Mm-hmm.
or for their art. It was a no brainer for me to be a part of that. And so, starting as a faculty member and then being consistent and doing great work and, really feeling like I was, a part of that family in a different way now, was a part of it as a student, but really a part of like, the makeup, like how this place is actually working for students was really special. And so being a part of that, to then going into the chair position, it just, it was just happening. I'm in there moving and shaking, and things are happening. Kids are being successful and getting into schools and all these things, and I guess people see you doing good work and, seeing your heart in it. And so I think that's just doors just started opening and people were like, Kesha, well, you would be great for this. You would be great for that, And so now I'm in this director of arts position. Whoa, an administrator. Who would have thought?
Well, I do have to ask, because you do have these different roles that you play, right? And what if you could identify maybe one thing that you would say is different between being in the studio with the students versus being an administrator? Because like you said, you're still empowering the program, you're still empowering the students. Do you have just as much time in one-on-one time with these students as you did before?
Unfortunately, I don't. If my time is limited with students, that is a down, drawback to being in this position. But so here's the difference. So when I'm with students and I'm in the dance studio, I'm thinking about dance. I'm thinking about these specific students right in front of me. And, there's this, this conversation, this, symbiotic relationship. Like we're literally feeding off of each other and I'm
Mm-hmm.
giving of myself. They're giving, back to me, um, in that particular moment. But when I'm at the table, that administrative table, it is more about the school as a whole. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not just a group of students in front of me, but like literally students, faculty, staff, everybody on
Yeah.
campus is impacted by the conversations, by the decisions that are being made at that table. And so it's like a perspective shift.
Right. It sounds like a larger impact overall.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, taking
Yeah.
what you're learning with the students and being able to address that on a larger scale. That's
Totally.
really incredible.
It really is. It really is. And initially when they asked me to step into this role, I was like, what? I'm an artist. Like, I can't do this. Like, what is this? I don't sit at tables and be in meetings. But then, really thinking about it, I was like, wow, I could really have impact, like a
Mm-hmm.
real voice in the decision making for not just now, but for years to come, thinking about, the 10-year, 20, 30, 50-year, trajectory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there something that, or quality translation is what I'm thinking about how who you are as an artist translates into an administrator? Is there an attribute or a skill or something that you've learned as a dancer from your training or from your teaching experience that translates into being an administrator?
That is a good question. Um, I think when I'm a little bit of I consider myself a slow processor. Um, so when I'm taking information in, but it really is me taking information in, not just mentally, but physically. Like there's a physical thing that takes place and my response is coming from the feeling, like it's this internal kind of space that that's communicating. And I feel the same in dance, when I'm taking things in, or even when I'm choreographing, like it's not coming just from my head. It's literally coming from inside of me. So I would say that that's a parallel.
Yes, that's that the word that comes to my mind is whole person. Is
Yes.
coming as your whole person, coming as your whole self, coming like physically, mentally, um, embodying what this is and being able to move it forward. And I think that's, I don't know, maybe that's what the upper administration see in you, is that ability to come as a whole person and being able to empathize really with students, with other faculty, with the school, with their identity. That's really incredible. Now, you mentioned a moment ago what kind of brought you back to NOCA, and um, understanding that environment and where you are geographically. So it's been reported that tropical cyclones make landfall along the coast of Louisiana every 2 to 3 years, and hurricanes make landfall every 2.8 years. And in 2020 alone, in the middle of a global pandemic, five, no less than five, were reported in that area. And I'm blown away by this idea. And so our listeners know that we are located here in Southeast Texas, and we too experience hurricanes, tropical storms, but to that scale. And you're our neighbor, you're right there. And so to be so close, but to have such a different experience, it's not a situation or an event that happens. It's a way of life. And that was just really incredible with reading that and trying to understand that for myself. And so I guess my question for you is, how does this way of life impose on the education process and the learning environment for your students?
Let me start there. Hurricane season is just like you said, it's a reality. It is a way of life. We, as a city, as a community, as schools, like we prepare for hurricane season. There are literally vacation days embedded in our schedule for hurricane season in the event that a storm hits, because we know that usually it might be like a day or two, just if it didn't quite hit us, or we got impacted by power and power outage or anything like that. But if it hits us, we're talking at least a week out of school. So it's almost like trying to front load as much, but hurricane season is in the midst of at the start of school. Like it's literally there when we start. So it's like getting that quick jump in. Let's get as much done as we can just in case the storm is coming. And then, preparing some asynchronous assignments for students to be able to take home. And, that's also tricky as well because not every student has the same home situation and are
Right.
even able to do things at home, in the way another student may be able to. So, trying to find ways, equitable ways for students to be able to remain engaged and not get, too far behind. But literally, it's just when you get back, it's the catch up. It's the catch up. Um, yeah.
And I guess my next question is the the student themselves, and what is their response to this? I mean, adults handle these situations quite differently than young people do. I mean, if I was in high school and you're telling me I get to stay home for a week, woohoo! I'm excited I'm staying home. But now I'm staying home for a whole week with my siblings, and I may or may not have power, and I may or may not be able to leave, and I don't know when I'm going to get to go back. Um, what are some of the things that you see happen in students around these situations?
Yeah, initially it's like, oh, we're out of school, and then it's the reality hits that some people's homes may flood.
Mm,
Some might lose their roofs, and we've had tornadoes hit as a part of these hurricanes coming now, and it's so scary. Like you see students get nervous. You see students um, you know, asking questions, to try to find just a little bit of, maybe solace, a little bit of relief or, hope, just some hope that,
mm,
maybe it'll just pass us this time.
yeah.
Now, these kids that we're teaching right now were not here when Hurricane Katrina hit. So they don't necessarily have the PTSD that us grown folks have from Hurricane Katrina, but they have experienced some storms and some pretty bad things that have happened, as a result of this inclement weather. So they know and they understand. And again, some are much more impacted than others. Some have the means to, as soon as we get out, some parents are picking them up even before they're let out to evacuate.
Mm,
So
mhm.
they have a safe place to go. They're not really thinking about, oh, we're going to be in harm's way. But some families don't have the means. So, those are the families that we kind of have to check on. We're reaching out, we're trying to make sure that families are okay. If folks need anything, we're really trying to, provide those resources, especially for the families that we know have a higher need.
Yeah, and you mentioned that sometimes you could be out for up to a week, but what is that bounce back look like for the students and the faculty, really?
Yeah. It's always like you gotta come in with it's a reset.
Mm,
We come in, we may talk about what our experience was. We don't necessarily sit in it or dwell in anything, but we do want student voice, for them to be
yeah.
able to just come in and talk about what they experienced and release some of it. And then, allow them to, if it was some pain or frustration or, some traumatic experience that they had, to just allow that to, float off of them as we move through the space. And so
Hmm.
having
Hmm.
dance, being a movement art practice is really beneficial, in that sense. I mean, of course, arts in general, but specifically movement in my mind, like I'm thinking because it's literally, you're physically able to move
Yes.
things through a space, like move trauma out of your body, with physical movement. So yeah.
I mean, I know for an adult, yes. I just, for me, I'm still trying to, I'm trying to remember when I was a young person and I was, that age and kind of some of the experiences that I had and what I was thinking about and what I was trying to do to process all of it. And it really was, I just need to get back.
Yeah.
I just need to get back. Like if I can get out of this place and get back to that place, then I'll be okay, and then I'll be able to move forward, and then I'll be able to start the process of letting it come out, letting it flow through until the next time.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you just got to give a good class where you're just like, they're just going the whole time, and then by the end of it, they're just like,
Yeah.
put
Yes.
everything out.
Work it out.
Yes.
So, also too, being the founder and director of KM Dance Project, choreographer, creating your art at the same time, in the same capacity. So, can you speak a little bit to these impacts on the company and the creative process?
Yeah. It's literally like you have to adjust planning. Like you have to consider that as you plan. Hurricane season. Oh, do we want to do something in August? Maybe not. Let's wait till October.
We're just
Let's
gonna block out. It's like blackout dates from here to here. Don't even bother.
yes. You know, but we care for each other as well. We're checking in on folks and sis, are you okay? Yep. How you guys made out? Do y'all need anything? We try to make sure that that folks are okay because we have babies, families, and things, and so that's really important for us. Um, yeah, we care for each other first, and then if we're able to get into some processing, because sometimes we some big event may have happened, and we may have had rehearsal planned and everybody's okay. We come to rehearsal and we just spend that rehearsal time just literally processing, talking about what happened, caring for each other, and just bringing us back into a space of this circle, this strong sister circle, like we got this.
Yeah, it's creating that safe space.
Yes.
Creating that safe space for not only artists but for people. And I mean, organizing a company myself, it does become an extended family, right? You spend so much time together. You get to know each other on such a different level.
Yes.
I mean, art is vulnerability. And so coming into the studio, and I think being able to be at such a vulnerable level with this particular group of people, that when something like this happens, I think it affects us on a different level, because vulnerability to me also helps to generate empathy.
Oh yes.
And then you bring that empathy into the space, and creating that safe space for everybody to come together and be able to process, I think is really important. And it's really beautiful because it sounds as if you're doing the same thing for the students at the school. And then with the company, is this creating a safe space, creating openness, creating allowance,
Yeah.
an allowance for them to be humans first, which is so beautiful.
Yes.
On behalf of all of them, thank you. Thank you for being able to do this for your community, because I think sometimes that's the basis of it, is remembering that we're all humans first, no matter what. And I think that too is, when I've experienced some of these things here in Texas, that is the number one thing I realize, is that in these moments that we have no control over, we'll call them natural disasters, if you will, and strangers become neighbors. Lines, divides, barriers, they start to dissolve for a little while. And there's something really beautiful about that. Do we have to wait for a natural disaster to happen? That's my question, and I don't have the answer to it, but there's something about that sense of community that is really beautiful. We all benefit from it, and then how can we explore that more in our daily lives and daily experiences? So
yeah, absolutely. The only other time I've seen that happen is when we have a Saints game.
Okay, all right, yes. There are events that unite. That is true. So let's talk a little bit more about your creative endeavors. So, like we mentioned, you are the founder director of KM Dance Project with a vision to challenge societal standards and a collaborating artist with Dance Grounds focusing on dance for social change. Um, so, I'm interested in understanding your vision as a creative and what draws you to what I'm calling mission driven work.
Yeah. One of my mentors, Miss Carol B. Bell, she is the former executive director of Ashe Cultural Arts Center. She was
Mhm.
really one of the founders of that center, and so I worked under her in a lot of my formative years as far as developing my administrative skills. I started with they had this production called The Origins of Life on Earth. And then I started their youth program. It was a youth cultural arts program called the Kaumba Institute. And so she really mentored me through that process. Honestly, she was like, Kesha, I want you to start this youth program for me. This is what I want. And I know you can do it. So here we go. So this is what I did. And I would meet with her every week. And so this is where I started, it was a precursor to KM Dance Project. It was called Crescent City Dance Troupe. No, sorry, Crescent City Choreographers.
Okay.
Crescent City Choreographers. And it was myself and two other dancers that decided to start this company. And our goal was to just have opportunities to create work, to choreograph. And as I was thinking about this work and starting to develop my first real, choreographing piece, Ms. Bell was sitting. She was like, Kesha, she was like, I really believe in your work, and I really, believe you have the ability to do so much. And she said, but really think about, what it is that you're doing with your art. She said, art is not just, it can be, just for someone to watch and look at and enjoy and take part in. She said, or it can actually, shift lives and shift perspective.
Mm.
Like it can be impactful. And so she said, you actually have the power to do that. She said, you're a great storyteller. She was like, tell your stories and, really think about what's impactful to you, what means a lot to you. And, feel free to put that on the stage because, if it's the replication of life, then people are going to be impacted by it. And so they really did stick with me. And at the time I was, my cousin was actually killed. Um, and I just was, in a place where I was questioning, like, why is this so much
Mhm.
violence? Why is, this happening and that happening? So I was working on this piece called Taken. Um, which basically is a historical journey of like the African American male being taken, during slavery, during the war, and then during street violence and gang violence and all these things. And so that was like my first kind of, real stab at getting deep and you know, getting into, social justice and social commentary. Like what was the statement that I was making? Um, and yeah, so, getting into research, I feel like, diving into research and text and,
Mhm.
impactful, you know, m- move, impactful art, movies, all these sources, could really work to inform and send people not just, you know, n- give the audience an opportunity to not just look at just dance, but like give people an opportunity to experience a journey, like a full sensory experience, where that had the power to potentially shift the perspective. So, to me, it's really important to do that kind of work, to speak the voices that may have been unheard, to tell the stories that may have been untold, um, and to speak about what I feel has impacted my life, impacted my community. Um, yeah, because I feel like that's what's important to me. And I just,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's incredible. I want to swing back. You mentioned two things. First, the word research, which I'm very intrigued by right now, and how we define research. But then second, you talked about this full experience in your work. So if let's start with that one if we can, and kind of describe what that means to you. Are you using other medias? And if so, what forms, and how does that really impact the work that you're creating?
Yeah. I love other mediums. I, I'm really a theater baby, right? I'm really like this
Yes.
musical theater kind of kid. I came up singing, dancing, putting on my own productions at home. So I'm really the
Yes.
theater kid, right? And then I'm also a storyteller. So, I, yeah, I think it's important, what is necessary for the storytelling, I think, is where I tend to
Mm-hmm.
lean into, whether that be through movement, whether that be through words, whether that's through song, whether that's through sound, whether it's through film, through, some type of installation or collage or, something of that nature. I think what lends itself and really gives the links to the story is what's important to me. So, I love venturing out. I love incorporating other things into dance productions. Yeah, yeah, it's what I do. I feel like it's even how I create.
Hmm.
It's how I
Explain
create.
that. Explain that. How do you
Yeah.
create?
Yeah. I'll give an example. Like, I could be watching a movie that may have nothing to do with, the piece that I'm working on, but something about, I'll give an example. So this piece I choreographed, Boshimani Living Curiosities. This is the story of Sarji Bartman, the Venus Hottentot. And this movie, what is it called? Samuel Jackson, uh, it's the movie where he has the woman locked up in the house.
Okay.
All right. And so he ties her up like hog tied. And he's trying to get like the evil spirits out of her. Like he's trying
Okay.
to cleanse her of her sins, basically. But this hog tied moment, that visual for me was so impactful. And in this piece, we were really kind of exploring this idea of exhibition,
Mm-hmm.
and being, treated as an animal, being, it's this whole kind of play on sexuality. So all these little elements were coming as a part of that. And so this vision of like this, you know, arching back, reaching back, and we literally did like a slide to the floor and was like reaching for our feet. And so that was part of the choreography because it came from that particular vision, that imagery of that scene. So using stuff like that where it's things just stick with me. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's but it's a part of the storytelling, right? It's just how it looks, how it feels, because it was
Mm-hmm.
something about the way it felt that made it perfect for that moment. So yes, the look of it, but also it was the feeling of it, and it was the tension that was created as a result of that. So there's something about, energy. There's something about the look, the visual, of course, the connection to the story. Um, yeah, yeah, I'm rambling now. Sorry.
No, no, no. Because the way that you're describing it, I think helps me, but also helps the listener in how something that would seem random
Yes.
or disconnected, how it connects to what it is that you're doing. So that's going to take me to that research question that
Yeah.
I had. Is that, would you say this is a form of research for you? And then my question is, was that intentional research or was that life experience?
Ooh. Ooh, so one of my other mentors, Jawale Willa Josala, former executive director of artistic director of Urban Bush Women, she always says that research is everything that you're doing when you're working on a piece. Like literally, when you start to think about this idea, everything you see becomes a relationship to what it is you're creating. So whether it's it's maybe it's not intentional. Sometimes it can be intentional. Like I want to read this book because this book has subject matter that is, linked to these historical moments inside of this particular era that we're working in. So maybe I want to read those books. Maybe I want to, look at specific visual artwork by this artist that was, tapping into some of the same ideas or concepts that I'm really trying to investigate. But then there's the other things that I'm just walking around and I'm like, whoa, look at the shape of this sculpture. What is this reminds me of, oh, this would be really cool. Oh my God, this and then I bring it into the studio. Maybe I take a photo of it, bring it into the space and let's see what this feels like. Let's see what it looks like. Let's see, let's play around in it. Flip it upside down. I don't know. Let's try to make the shape. So we just play around with it at that point.
Yes, I'm just sitting here nodding along for those who can see, but for those who cannot see, like obviously, as my mama says, rocks don't rattle. But I'm just yes, 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 yes. I just want to shout yes as you're talking because I don't think that was something that was taught to me, but it is something that I do experience and how these things come about or come into play, and being at the museum and seeing the title of an artwork that then becomes the title of the work that you're working on, and they have looking at them two visual works, it looks as if they're completely disassociated, but the response, the feeling, the idea, the impression, the emotions that I got from this visual work to me were the exact replication of what I was doing. It was the essence of what I was doing. And it was just a random day to go to the museum, to check it out, to experience life. And I think as an educator, trying to help students understand kind of what that feels like without telling them you should go to a museum, experience life,
Right.
the conversations you're having with your friends, the things that you're studying in your other classes. How can you bring all of these in to influence not only who you are, but also your voice and what you share?
Absolutely.
And that's just, it's life changing. It's life shifting. And then how would you, if you could, because this is one of the questions I'm struggling with, is how do I define research? It was presented to me as research has to create new information.
Oh.
A lot of times research for me generates new questions.
Yeah, correct.
But not actually new information. And so I'm interested in, does research have to be conclusive?
I don't think so. I believe, I feel like research is like, is this space you kind of reach into to then pull into like your present area of like molding and transformation and shifting. And for me, even like, I'll give you a raw fruit. Like we toured the work, we performed it, I don't know how many times, but literally every single time I was like, okay, y'all, so let's think about this. Like this really came up for me when I was doing this. Literally, like it was changing and shifting and, evolving the entire time. So, it's never ending for me. It's like not concrete. It's not just like this one thing this is the thing, this is the answer, this is what it made. No,
Yes.
I feel like it is ever growing, ever evolving. Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me in answering that question, what I'm starting to kind of wrap around is this idea of discovery, in that research is about discovery. It's about exploration. It's not about a conclusion. But I also feel that I think that same way about my creative process, in that it's about the process, not the product.
Yeah.
It's but the journey to get there. Yes, we have a mission, we have a vision, we have a statement, we have a theme, we have a context, those sorts of things. And all of our decisions are impacting that, empowering it, and trying to make it as clear as possible. But there's always new information coming in to continue to make that clearer as you go along. So you mentioned raw fruit, and raw fruit received the National Performance Network Creation and Development Fund Awards and the New England Foundation for the Arts National Dance Project Production Grant. How long, my first question is, how long have you been in the concept of raw fruit from development? Because as you say, like, it's still continuing each time you show it to how long has that span been for you?
Wow. Literally 10 years now, I feel like. I don't know. Yeah,
Wow.
seriously. So 2016, I received a fellowship through Dancing While Black. And this was this exchange between New Orleans and New York artists. And so I was, flying to New York every month. We were, in these sessions and feeding off of each other. And then, we created a work at the end of the sessions, as like this culmination of the fellowship. And so as a part of that culmination, I came up with this solo. This was a solo that was rooted in my relationship with my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, and my relationship with my mother. And then I was really trying to navigate this kind of communication space, right? What are the things that my grandmother translated to me from her grandmothers and things? What was the information that was translated to my mother from my grandmother? What was translated to me from my mother that, and of course, you think about the things that actually got translated and then the things that actually got a little blurred and, reformed as it was translated. And then on the other side of that is how I received information, my interpretation of what was told or what was given to me, my mother's interpretation of what was given to her. So I was just really kind of navigating those things and honestly trying to work on my relationship with my mother. So that was really like the root, the seed of raw fruit, which, yeah, it kind of, yeah, I felt like this was something that could grow. Like it wasn't, this experience is not, it's more than just about me, right? Like so many other people have experiences like this. And so my first iteration of deepening and, expanding the work was actually bringing in male and female dancers. And so we did, this whole, it was a residency that I got at the CAC. And so I was like, okay, let's just work on this and workshop and do some things. And so, we did some research and came up with some other topics and, folks were bringing their own stories and their own experiences into the work. And that was really beautiful. So from that particular iteration, I was like, I want to develop this further. So I'm going to submit this for an NDP grant, which literally nobody in the state of Louisiana had ever received a National Dance Project Award. So this was
That's incredible.
Yes, this was like, okay, Kesha, you know what? All I can do is tell you no.
That's right.
All they can do is tell you no. So, applied for that and got the award, which was incredible. Incredible. Like I had never been able to, you know, have funding to support a work in that way. The development, let me say, the development of a work in that way. And to have that kind of funding and support was critical to the development of that work. I was able to bring in a musician to work with us for the entirety of the creative process along with all the dancers. So we're all in the creative process and redeveloping and, pulling things apart and digging in a little bit deeper, pulling back layers, digging in a little bit more deeper. And so the work that came out of it, oh my gosh. Yeah. It's still evolving. Like it is still like a living piece. It is a living piece because every single time we do it, it's so crazy. It was literally like therapy for all of us who were a part of the process. Literally therapy. We would all go home and just be like, oh my God, like my life has changed as a part of this work. Um, so, and gratefully so, audience members have come up and just saw themselves inside the work and, have left with just a whole new perspective and experience. And yeah, so it's been a really, really special work.
Can you talk a little bit more about that, the idea of the audience's perspective? And I like to call it a universal idea or a universal perspective. When you take something that's really specific to you, like this was your story with your mother, your grandmother, and your ideology and how you process that, to be able to open it up to the cast for them to have understanding, but then to be able to bring in an entire audience in, that's a universal understanding. And so the ability for your story to be able to do that from the audience's perspective, from your perspective, what is that? How do you see that?
Yeah. You know, it's so weird. I think when you never know what the audience is going to experience, right? You never know what their perspective is going to be, what they take away from the work, what they see in the work. So I don't know that I ever had a focus or anything on what the audience was going to take away from it. Like I knew what energies, what I wanted to say. I knew what the journey was supposed to be. Um, and I think focusing on an honest and authentic experience, like, which is, I think the theatrical part of, my body, just thinking about like, how do I like, how do they believe that I'm actually going through this right now? You know, uh, yeah, and energetically kind of tapping into this, really deep place inside. Um, and I think that when that happens, I think that is what is a part of, what can trigger memories or what can kind of, trigger similarities and experiences. And maybe it's not even a same experience, but something is triggered for them that connects them to a particular moment in the work. So yeah, and through talkbacks, I think the deepening is also when we do talkbacks after the work and people can ask questions and like, maybe they're thinking about this one moment. They're like, I don't know what's happening, but it just feels like something and I want to know more about what's happening here. And when they ask the question, it's like, oh, right. Yes, I really felt this thing or, experienced this thing. So yeah.
This kind of takes me back to what we talked about earlier in this idea of being able to work with the dancer and and what that role does for you, and then being an administrator and how that kind of opens up space for a larger impact. And I feel as if the same journey happens with the experience that you just talked about, is that it is the small something that is empowering the self that then empowers a small group. But by sharing it with the audience, it widens that impact for them to experience it. And then listening to you describe the audience's response takes me back to your research yourself. What you were talking about is like, this doesn't actually relate at all, but yet it's bringing up this feeling, this thought, this emotion. And it's just, for me, that is one of the beautiful things about dance, is the level of vulnerability that is accessible to an audience, the level of empathy, the connection. It may not be exact, but human to human, we're here with each other right now in this space. And I think that goes circles back. I get into that idea of when we are taken out of our normal context in a traumatic experience, and we remember that we are human first, and then we're on the same level, the same playing field with one another. The connection, I think, is really the most beautiful aspect of what I'm able to do as an artist. And just those layers that you continue to talk about in each aspect, whether it be as an educator, an administrator, a choreographer,
Yeah.
it's really beautiful. Again, I
Yeah,
just want to say thank you for that.
absolutely. I had not even thought about that. Like making that connection is really profound. Like I just, wow. But I'm just so glad that you're making the connection because, now I can be even more intentional about like, the way I'm doing things, like the way I'm working. Yeah, this is super huge for me.
So, is raw fruit going to be shown again anytime soon?
Yeah, that is a great question. Should someone call me and say we have funding to bring you out to perform Rough Fruits? Absolutely.
Mm, yes,
um,
all of our
right.
dance producers, impresarios. Yes, this podcast is for you.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Unfortunately, we don't have any additional like tour subsidy funding to support
Okay.
that, but we would totally be open to performing it again. But now we are kind of focusing on developing a new work. Yeah, so raw food is still sitting there. She's still
She's still
sitting
there.
there.
Well, I think it's probably one of those works that's not going to leave,
Right, right.
because it does, the way you described it, it felt personal, and the idea that you still want to continue to develop it if the opportunity arises. It's just one of
Yeah,
those that just really sticks with you.
yeah,
That's
totally.
really beautiful. Well, Keisha, I could spend all night talking with you. This has been absolutely wonderful, but we have come to the rapid round to close out our conversation.
Mhm. Okay.
So, our rapid round includes two sentences. So, if you could complete the following sentences. The first one is: resilience is.
Resilience is pushing through, fighting for, and never allowing yourself to give up.
Yes. And dance has taught me.
Ooh, yeah.
Sorry, they're not easy.
Right. Okay. Dance has taught me to trust my inside voice,
Mm,
to allow myself to express honestly and from an authentic space.
yes, that is beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I genuinely appreciate you taking the time to talk with me on Dance Unscripted.
Yes.
And we wish you the very best in your new project.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. I had so much fun.
Thank you for joining us for Dance Unscripted, presented by AIM Dance. Knowing you could have chosen any other platform, you chose us and you chose dance. Thank you. Be sure to click the subscribe button and share this episode with a dance-loving friend. Leave us a review on Spotify and your name will be entered into a drawing for Dance Unscripted merch. The winners will be announced at the end of each episode. Season 1 is brought to you by a grant from the Lamar University Center for Resiliency.